It was Christmas Eve. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey mingling with the sharp scent of pine from the tree, a smell that should have felt comforting but instead made my stomach twist. Laughter floated around the dining room table. My parents, my sister, and my in-laws all gathered around, glasses clinking, plates full of food, voices rising in warmth and cheer. I smiled at the right moments and nodded at the jokes, trying to keep the mood light, but inside I was tense. Every time I glanced at Daniel, the way his hand drummed lightly against the table, his eyes flicking toward the window or the clock, the barely perceptible twitch of his jaw, the slight curl of his lip, it all set off a warning bell in my chest, a cold prickle down my spine. I had always trusted him with my heart, with my life, with every secret I had held dear, but tonight something felt off, and I couldn't place it. I should have known. I should have seen it coming. The subtle things had been there. The long work nights, the phone calls he suddenly had to take outside, the hushed whispers when he thought I wasn't listening, the distracted sighs when I mentioned Christmas plans. I had brushed them off, telling myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. And now that instinct screamed at me, warning me of the storm I could sense gathering. I tried to steady my breathing, forcing myself to focus on the conversation around me, but the laughter felt hollow, the clinking of glasses sharp, like glass breaking somewhere deep inside me. Dinner went on. The turkey was juicy, the mashed potatoes creamy, the scent of baked apples in the pie on the side filled my senses, but I barely tasted a bite. I tried to focus on my parents telling stories of childhood, their laughter warm and familiar, my sister joking with the kids, my niece squealing as she tore into a present, but it all felt distant, almost surreal. I laughed at the right moments, but it felt automatic, a mask, a way to survive the tension coiling around Daniel like a storm cloud. The tree lights twinkled softly in the corner, casting warm glows on faces and ornaments, but even that glow felt cold tonight, as if the house itself knew what was coming. I found myself noticing every small detail, the way Daniel's ring caught the light, the faint smudge of frosting on his cuff, the way his lips pressed together when he thought no one was looking. It was as though my mind was cataloging every subtle clue, every tiny betrayal that had accumulated without me noticing. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, gifts. My little niece carried the box in her chubby hands, giggling and stumbling slightly, her excitement contagious yet distant to me. Daniel rose slowly and cleared his throat. The room fell silent, as if everyone sensed the weight of what he was about to say. I felt my heart pick up, my palms sweaty, my mind racing with hope. Maybe a necklace, maybe a trip, maybe something to remind us why we had fallen in love, maybe a sign that he still cared. But when he slid the large white envelope across the table, my fingers trembled. I tore it open. The words blurred before my eyes, divorce petition. The room went completely silent. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. My sister whispered, "Oh my God." My father's face went red, his hands gripping the table. Daniel smirked, his voice steady and cold. "Merry Christmas, Emily. I think it's time we stop pretending." The world spun around me. My ears rang. I could hear my heartbeat like a drum in my head. I stared at the papers, and then at him, every memory flashing before my eyes, the sparkle in his eyes when we first met, the way he laughed at my jokes, the nights we stayed up talking until dawn, the nursery we painted together, the trips we dreamed about, all the plans and promises. And now they felt like lies. I looked around at the faces of our family. My parents frozen, my sister wide-eyed, my in-laws stiff and uncomfortable. I wanted to scream, throw the papers across the room, melt into tears and rage all at once, but I forced myself to stay still, to breathe, to hold on to the small shard of control I still had. I realized in that instant who he truly was, and who I was. I clenched my fists under the table, holding on to the tiniest spark of resolve. Daniel leaned back, smug, as if he had won a cruel game. My throat burned. My lips trembled. But I forced myself to hold steady. The house felt suddenly too big and too small at once, suffocating and intimate. I understood the full scope of what he had done, and what I would now have to face. I had a choice, to crumble to despair, or to take the first step in reclaiming everything he thought he could take. And though I felt broken, I also felt a spark of determination rising like embers igniting in the dark. I remembered the moments I had overlooked, the tiny signs that now made perfect sense, the late nights he claimed were for work, the sudden trips he said were urgent, the phone calls he said were important. They had all been pieces of a puzzle I had refused to see, and now the picture was horrifyingly clear. I realized that Christmas Eve, that night, that moment would define not just the evening, but the rest of my life. The world may have spun out of control around me, but I would not fall apart here. Not yet. Not now. I looked at Daniel, and for the first time truly saw him for who he was. And for the first time, I saw myself clearly. I saw the strength I had ignored, the resilience I had buried under love and hope, and I understood that my life was no longer something he could dictate. The rest of the night stretched before me, filled with tension, confrontation, grief, and perhaps the first steps toward freedom. And though I could not have known it yet, I felt a quiet resolve settle deep in my chest. I would not break. I would not beg. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me defeated tonight. I would survive this night, and when it was over, I would be stronger than ever. The tree lights reflected in the envelope on the table, mocking him silently, and I knew that from this moment forward, nothing would ever be the same. I felt the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on me as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My mother clutched her chest, her face pale, her lips trembling. My sister whispered under her breath, "Emily, say something," but my throat was dry, and my voice felt trapped behind a wall I couldn't break through. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smug, as if he had just delivered the final blow of a carefully calculated performance. His smirk was infuriating because it made him look calm, in control, untouchable, and I could feel my blood pressure rise, the warmth of anger and disbelief flooding through me. Why now? I managed to croak, my voice shaking but carrying enough force to pierce the tension in the room. Why like this, on Christmas, in front of everyone? He looked at me then, his eyes sharp, unyielding, and said, "Because it's time to stop living a lie. You and I both know this marriage is dead, and I'm tired of pretending." My mother gasped again, a sharp intake of breath that seemed to echo in my chest. My father's hand slammed lightly against the table, his face flushed with fury. "This isn't the time, Daniel. Nor the place," he growled, his voice low, dangerous, warning him to stop. Daniel shrugged casually, the epitome of arrogance. "Actually, it's the perfect time. She deserves the truth, I deserve my freedom." His words sliced through me like ice. I stared at him, feeling a rage so sharp it burned my insides. "Freedom from what, Daniel?" I whispered, barely controlling the shake in my voice. "Freedom from me? From your family? From everything we built together?" He didn't flinch. He didn't soften. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with an air of triumph, and said, "Freedom to be with someone who actually makes me happy." The room went silent again, heavier than before. "Someone," my sister blurred, "someone else?" Her voice cracked, disbelief dripping from every word. I felt my knees weaken, but I forced myself to straighten, to hold on to what little control I had. I could see the flicker of doubt cross Daniel's face for just a fraction of a second, but it vanished immediately, replaced by arrogance, smugness, certainty. I lifted the divorce papers slowly, deliberately, letting my fingers brush the glossy envelope as if it burned me. "So this is your gift to me, Daniel," I said, my voice gaining strength with each word, "years of my loyalty, love, sacrifices, and on Christmas, you decide to humiliate me in front of everyone. Merry Christmas." He smirked again, his confidence almost nauseating, and said, "You think you can stop me? You think this changes anything?" I laughed softly, a cold, sharp laugh, shaking my head. "No, Daniel. What changes everything is that you think you have control. You think this is your victory. You're wrong. My father slammed his hand on the table this time, hard enough to make the cutlery jump. "How dare you treat my daughter this way? How dare you bring shame into this house?" Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but my mother's soft sob stopped him mid-sentence. She whispered through her tears, "You humiliated her, and you humiliated yourself." The words hit him like a punch. I could see the color drain from his face, the smirk faltering for the first time. I felt a strange surge of power, a pulse of validation in the midst of all the chaos. I leaned closer, my voice low and steady. "You may have handed me papers, Daniel, but I have something for you too. Something you won't see coming. Something that will wipe that smile right off your face." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion flashing for the first time that night. He opened his mouth, but I turned back to the table and smiled, calm and controlled. "Let's finish dinner, shall we? Because after dessert, I have something to share." The room was tense, thick with anticipation, every fork, every cup, every rustle of wrapping paper amplified in the silence. Daniel's fingers fidgeted nervously, his veneer of control starting to crack. My mother dabbed at her eyes, my father muttered under his breath, my sister whispered, "Emily, what are you going to do?" I ignored them all, letting my calm mask the storm inside me. I could feel the surge of anger and betrayal, but I also felt clarity, the focus of someone who has been pushed to the edge and refuses to fall. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of tension and quiet observation. Every bite I took, every sip I pretended to enjoy, every laugh I forced, was calculated, deliberate, a preparation for what was coming. I watched Daniel carefully, noting his slightest movements, the subtle twitch of his lips, the way he avoided meeting my gaze. It was all part of the puzzle, the final act that I would unveil. I had spent weeks preparing for this, gathering the evidence he thought I was too naive to notice, crafting a plan he would never see coming, and now the moment was nearly here. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls themselves were waiting for what was about to happen. My heart pounded, a mix of adrenaline and righteous fury. Daniel may have thought he controlled the evening, controlled me, but he had no idea that the tide had turned, and very soon, the truth would be laid bare for everyone in that room. I breathed in slowly, letting the calm wash over me, masking the fire inside, and knew that when I finally revealed my gift, everything would change. Not just for him, but for me. Not just for tonight, but for the rest of my life. Dessert arrived, the sweet scent of cinnamon and apple wafting through the air, but I barely noticed it, my mind focused entirely on Daniel and the moment I had been preparing for. He had spent the entire dinner smug, thinking he had all the control, that handing me divorce papers on Christmas was the final act of power, the ultimate humiliation. I watched him carefully, his fingers drumming lightly on the table, the faint twitch of his jaw betraying impatience, the subtle narrowing of his eyes betraying suspicion. Every detail mattered, every motion, every breath, every blink. I had spent weeks preparing this, gathering evidence, building a plan, and now the moment to strike was nearly here. I took a deep breath, feeling the calm and fire within me intertwine, like ice and fire battling and balancing. The fork trembled slightly in my hand, not from fear, but from anticipation, from the adrenaline surging through my veins. Daniel's eyes flicked toward me again, a trace of curiosity mixed with arrogance. He thought he had one. He had no idea how badly he had underestimated me. I leaned forward, casually, almost lazily, as if nothing mattered, as if I were a woman enjoying a quiet Christmas night. "Daniel," I said softly, my voice calm but carrying weight, "I think it's time for your gift." His smirk faltered ever so slightly. "Gift?" he asked, one eyebrow raised, suspicion creeping into his tone. "Yes," I said, deliberately slow, letting the word hang in the air like a challenge. I reached beneath the table and pulled out a small, silver-wrapped box tied with a red ribbon. The wrapping sparkled in the light of the tree, reflecting across his smug, expectant face. He froze. The room seemed to hold its breath. My mother blinked, my sister's eyes widened, my father's hand hovered over his fork. Daniel's fingers twitched nervously. What is that?" he asked, voice tight. I smiled faintly, calm, controlled, my heartbeat steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. It's a gift for you, Daniel. Open it. The room was silent. My niece squeaked in curiosity, but everyone else was transfixed. Daniel's hands hesitated, hovering over the box as if he could sense a trap, as if some instinct deep within him knew this was not going to go the way he thought. With a reluctant shrug, he lifted the lid. Inside lay a flash drive, taped carefully to a folded note. His brow furrowed as he picked it up, the smirk that had carried him through the evening beginning to slip. What's this?" he asked, voice sharp, defensive. I leaned closer, my eyes locked on his. "Your gift, Daniel." The truth. The tension in the room was palpable. My mother whispered, "Emily, what are you doing?" but I ignored her, letting the moment build. Daniel's fingers fumbled with the drive, a bead of sweat forming at his temple. I smiled, letting calmness mask the fire burning within me. "Go ahead," I said softly. "Plug it in. Show everyone the truth." He hesitated, glancing around the room for an ally, for a sign that someone would stop me, for anything, but found none. My father's gaze was unwavering, my mother's eyes full of cautious hope, my sister staring at me with awe and fear and pride all mixed together. The silence pressed against him, suffocating, and finally, he slid the drive into the TV port. The screen flickered. I could see him stiffen, the first crack in his armor, as images and messages began to appear. The first photo, him holding hands with another woman outside a hotel. The second, a kiss in the parking lot. The third, emails scrolling, words glowing on the screen, every line a confirmation of betrayal, proof of months of lies. My stomach twisted but my hands stayed steady. I watched Daniel's face drain of color as each image, each email, each truth was laid bare. He opened his mouth, but no words came. I could hear my mother whisper, "Oh my God," my sister shouting, "I knew it." My father's hand slammed on the table, voice booming, "You disgraceful man." Daniel stammered, trying to speak, to deny, to twist, but it was futile. I took a step closer, my voice low, controlled, cutting through the stunned silence. "So this is your gift back, Daniel. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment you thought you could get away with hiding your true self." His face contorted with rage, disbelief, and panic. "Emily. You can't, this isn't fair," he shouted, the room vibrating with the sound of his fury. I shook my head, calm, unshaken. "No, Daniel. This is fair. This is the truth. And the truth has a way of catching up to people like you." My family watched, their expressions shifting from shock to validation, from disbelief to support. Daniel lunged for the remote, tried to stop the evidence, but my father intercepted it, holding it firmly in his hand. "Let it play, Daniel," he said, voice deadly calm. "Let the world see you for who you really are." The emails scrolled faster, the images clearer, and Daniel's smirk disappeared entirely, replaced by panic. I stepped closer, whispering only to him, a quiet, lethal calm, "Merry Christmas, Daniel. Looks like I win." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the TV and the crackling of the fireplace. Every face in the room bore witness to his downfall. Every eye looked at me, not with pity, but with respect, with awe, with pride. The storm of betrayal had turned into a moment of triumph. And I felt, for the first time all evening, the heavy weight of tension lift slightly from my chest. Daniel's shoulders slumped, his jaw tightened, and in that moment, I realized that the power had shifted. He had tried to humiliate me, to control me, to steal my peace, but instead, I had reclaimed it all. The moment stretched, frozen in time, the room heavy with disbelief and tension, every breath, every blink, every shuffle amplified by the silence that followed Daniel's unmasked betrayal. He stood there, pale, stiff, eyes darting around as if looking for an escape that didn't exist, hands trembling slightly as if the weight of his own lies had suddenly become tangible. My mother's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the table, tears brimming, yet her gaze never left him, a mixture of horror and fierce protection for me. My father's jaw was tight, his fists clenched, a storm barely contained behind a calm exterior, his voice waiting to explode at the right moment. My sister whispered, "Emily. I can't believe it." I knew it, and I felt a surge of vindication mixed with sorrow, that bitter taste of truth that's always sharper when someone you love has been lied to for so long. Daniel opened his mouth, trying to form a protest, a denial, a reason, but the evidence on the screen was unstoppable, unforgiving, undeniable. Every email, every photo, every timestamp was a nail in the coffin of his arrogance. I watched him flail, saw the desperation creeping into his eyes, the first real sign that his power over me had evaporated. My voice cut through the thick air, calm, precise, every word deliberate. "Daniel, it's over. Not just the marriage, not just the papers, but the control you thought you had over me, over everyone in this room. Gone." His smirk was gone, replaced by a twitching, angry, fearful look, the realization that he was exposed, that he had underestimated me completely. He tried to grab the flash drive from the TV, but my father's hand was faster, holding it firmly, refusing to hand over the instrument of his humiliation. "Let it play, Daniel," my father said, low, dangerous, a warning that had the weight of years of respect and authority behind it. "Let everyone see the truth." My mother dabbed at her tears, her voice trembling yet firm. "You've lied, humiliated, and betrayed, and now it's time to face the consequences." Daniel's hands shook as he reached for the papers again, perhaps hoping to reassert control, to take back the narrative, but it was too late. Every image, every message, every carefully documented betrayal was etched in the room, in our minds, impossible to erase. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on his, my voice soft yet carrying the edge of steel. "This is the truth, Daniel. The truth you tried to hide, the truth you hoped no one would ever see. And now, everyone knows who you are." He opened his mouth again, words tumbling out in a frantic, incoherent mix, but no one listened. Everyone's eyes were on him, on me, on the undeniable proof of his deceit. I felt a strange sense of calm, a satisfaction that came not from revenge, but from finally reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my power. The fire in my chest burned brightly, steady, controlled, focused, and I realized that the humiliation he thought he could inflict on me had backfired spectacularly. I could see the panic growing in him, the tightness of his jaw, the rapid blinking of his eyes, the subtle tremor in his fingers, and I knew in that moment that the tables had turned completely. My sister leaned closer to my mother, whispering in awe and fear, "She's amazing." "Emily," my heart swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. My father's voice finally broke through the silence, booming and unyielding. "You will answer for every lie, Daniel. Every betrayal. You will not walk out of here with your head held high while destroying her life." Daniel's shoulders sagged, the weight of exposure and defeat pressing down on him like a tangible force. His arrogance, his smugness, his illusion of control, all shattered in seconds, leaving behind a man exposed, vulnerable, and powerless. I felt the adrenaline of the confrontation mix with a deep, underlying sadness for the man he had become, the man I had once loved. But there was no room for pity tonight, no room for hesitation. The moment demanded clarity, action, and resolution. I stepped back slightly, letting the room absorb the tension, letting Daniel see, feel, and understand the full scope of his downfall. Every face in the room bore witness, every pair of eyes reflecting disbelief, shock, and growing respect for the woman who had finally reclaimed her power. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. The world had tried to humiliate me, but I had turned it into my stage. The tables had shifted, and I was standing tall. Daniel's attempts to control, manipulate, and dominate were rendered useless, meaningless. The evidence spoke louder than any argument, any denial, any manipulation. I let my gaze linger on him, calm, unyielding, resolute, letting him absorb the weight of what he had done and what he had lost. "Merry Christmas, Daniel," I whispered, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of finality. The room seemed to exhale collectively, the tension shifting, the fear and anger in Daniel's eyes mirrored by the silent support and pride radiating from my family. And as the fireplace crackled softly in the background, I realized that this night, this confrontation, this reclaiming of truth and dignity, was only the beginning. The storm had been weathered, the battle won, and I felt, for the first time in months, a sense of clarity, control, and undeniable power. The rest of the night stretched before us, heavy with confrontation and conversation yet filled with a quiet, steady sense that the worst had been faced, the truth laid bare, and the future, my future, was mine to shape, mine to control, and mine to reclaim fully. After the confrontation, the room was quiet, charged with a tension that felt almost electric, each person processing what had just unfolded, each face reflecting shock, relief, and disbelief. Daniel slumped back in his chair, defeated, his eyes darting around for a way out, for some shred of dignity he could cling to, but it was gone, evaporated in the harsh light of truth. I felt a strange calm wash over me, a sense of clarity and control I hadn't experienced in months, maybe even years, as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I stood up slowly, letting my movements deliberate and calm, every step echoing in the tense room, and I knew I had to reclaim not just my dignity but my life. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady and precise, "the papers you handed me earlier are irrelevant now. They may claim to end a marriage, but they don't end me. They don't define me. You've lost your power here, and it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." He opened his mouth, ready to argue, but I raised a hand, cutting him off. "No, Daniel. Silence is yours now. You'll speak when I allow it, not before." My mother blinked, tears still shimmering, but her expression was proud, supportive, a quiet validation of the strength she had always known I had. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes hard, unwavering, a silent declaration that he would not allow me to be further harmed. My sister stepped closer to me, whispering, "You're incredible, Emily. I've never seen you like this." I nodded, letting their support anchor me as I focused on the next step, the action I had been planning for weeks, the reclaiming of not just my heart but my future. I walked over to my desk, opening a locked drawer, and pulled out a stack of documents, contracts, evidence I had collected meticulously, each piece a bulletproof layer of protection against any further manipulation. I turned back to the room, holding them with confidence, the fire in my chest steady and unyielding. "These," I said, letting the words settle in the air like smoke, "represent everything you thought you could hide, everything you thought I wouldn't see, wouldn't prove, wouldn't use. From now on, Daniel, your lies, your deceit, your betrayal are documented, undeniable, and your attempts to control me are finished." Daniel's face drained of color again, the smirk long gone, replaced by pure panic and disbelief. He opened his mouth, stammering, You can't." I shook my head slowly, a calm fury in my eyes. "I can, Daniel. I will. And I am. This isn't just about exposing you to the family, or to your shame. It's about reclaiming myself, my life, my future. Every attempt you make to harm me will fail because I am prepared, and I am stronger than you ever imagined." My father stepped forward, voice firm, low, carrying authority and protection. "You will no longer walk over my daughter, Daniel. Every action you take from now on will have consequences, legal, personal, and moral. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded, the motion stiff, forced, his eyes avoiding mine, the weight of reality finally pressing down on him fully. I felt a strange surge of satisfaction, not from revenge, but from the simple, powerful act of reclaiming my autonomy, proving that no one, not even someone who once held my heart, could dictate my life. I turned to my family, letting them see the resolve in my posture, in my gaze, in the calm fire that burned inside me. "This isn't just about him," I said softly, letting the words resonate. "It's about me. About taking back what's mine. About moving forward without fear, without manipulation, without deceit." My mother reached out, placing a hand gently on my shoulder, tears falling freely now, not of sorrow but of pride. My sister nodded, a small smile of admiration and awe crossing her face. I felt the quiet strength of my family behind me, their support a shield against the chaos Daniel had tried to impose. I walked to the fireplace, letting the warmth wrap around me, and realized that this night, this Christmas, which had begun with betrayal and humiliation, had transformed into a declaration of independence, a rebirth of strength, a reclaiming of life. Daniel shrank in his chair, his arrogance shattered, the first real cracks in the facade of control he had built so meticulously. And I knew, deep inside, that the next steps, the future, would be mine to shape. No fear, no manipulation, no deceit could stand in the way of the woman who had finally seen the truth and chosen to rise above it. I looked at the tree, the lights twinkling softly, reflecting off the ornaments and the faces around me, and felt a sense of peace mixed with determination. This night had been the crucible, the testing of my strength, and I had emerged unbroken, unshaken, and unstoppable. I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and my power, and I knew that from this moment forward, Daniel no longer had a place in my life, nor would he ever again hold sway over my heart or decisions. The storm had passed, and the calm that followed was not the quiet of defeat, but the quiet of triumph, the steady, unyielding heartbeat of a woman who had finally taken back her life. The days after Christmas were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and planning, a whirlwind of decisions that I had been putting off for months, each one now falling squarely on my shoulders. But I felt a strength in me I hadn't realized was there until that night, a clarity that allowed me to see the path forward with sharp precision. Daniel's calls went unanswered, his messages unopened, and each time his name flashed across my phone, I felt a flicker of anger, quickly replaced by resolve, a reminder that I no longer needed him to define me or my life. I focused on myself, first small things, the way I organized my home, cleared away reminders of a past that had become toxic, put boundaries in place that even my family admired, subtle yet unyielding acts of reclaiming my personal space. Friends reached out, offering support, advice, comfort, and I accepted it this time, no longer hiding my pain behind forced smiles, letting the warmth of genuine care wrap around me like a blanket, a stark contrast to the cold manipulation I had endured. Work became my sanctuary, my outlet, a place where I could channel the anger, the disappointment, and the fire inside me into productivity, into creating something tangible, something meaningful. I realized how much I had lost myself trying to maintain a marriage that was no longer a partnership, and I vowed silently, fiercely, that I would never lose myself again. Legal proceedings followed, tedious and exhausting, but I faced each challenge with a calm determination that unnerved Daniel and impressed my lawyers and family alike. Every document I submitted, every argument I made, every countermove I prepared was meticulous, deliberate, and executed with precision, and I could feel the balance of power slowly tipping entirely in my favor. There were moments of doubt, fleeting and quiet, when memories of happier times threatened to soften my resolve, but I pushed them aside, reminding myself that those memories did not erase the betrayal, nor did they diminish my right to protect myself, to rebuild my life on my own terms. I began to reconnect with hobbies I had abandoned, the simple joys that reminded me of who I was before the weight of deceit and manipulation had settled in my life. Long walks, writing late into the night, painting, cooking elaborate meals just for me, small acts of reclaiming freedom and pleasure. My family remained my anchor. My mother would call in the evenings, just to hear my voice, to remind me that I was not alone, that the strength she had always seen in me was now blazing for everyone to witness. My sister became my partner in planning, helping me organize the house, decorating for small holidays, and laughing with me in ways that reminded me what joy felt like unfiltered. My father, steady and unwavering, became my advisor, guiding me through the tricky waters of legal and financial matters, ensuring that Daniel could not manipulate or intimidate me further. Slowly, carefully, I began to imagine a future without fear, without the shadow of betrayal looming over me. A future where I could make decisions, embrace opportunities, and love fully without compromise or hesitation. Each day felt like peeling back layers of darkness to reveal the sunlight beneath, each step forward a reminder of the resilience I had cultivated in the crucible of my pain. I started planning trips, reconnecting with friends, building a network of support and inspiration that reminded me of life's beauty and the possibilities that lay ahead. And though there were still moments when Daniel's shadow loomed in my mind, I no longer feared it. Instead, I recognized it for what it was, an obstacle I had already overcome, a a test of my strength that I had passed with grace and determination. Slowly, carefully, I built routines that reinforced my independence, my autonomy, and my joy. Mornings were now mine, spent with coffee on the balcony, the cold wind biting softly, reminding me that I was alive, that I was free, that I was in control. Evenings were spent in reflection, journaling, planning, and imagining the life I wanted, a life no one could take from me, a life built on honesty, strength, and self-respect. Daniel's presence faded gradually from my life, the memory of betrayal no longer a chainsaw tearing through my heart, but a lesson carved into my bones, a reminder of my own power and resilience. I found myself smiling more freely, laughing without restraint, and feeling a quiet pride in the woman I had become. Not defined by a marriage, not controlled by a past, but alive, thriving, and unapologetically myself. And in that process, I realized something profound. The greatest gift I could ever give myself was not revenge, not exposure, not proving him wrong. It was reclaiming my life, my joy, my peace. Every small act of self-care, every decision made from strength rather than fear, every boundary enforced, was a victory, and each victory felt sweeter than any fleeting triumph I could have taken from Daniel. I had survived the storm, faced the betrayal, confronted the lies, and now, fully, I was free. And in that freedom, I felt a clarity and a peace that no one could take away. The months that followed felt like waking from a long, suffocating dream, each day brighter than the last, each moment a small revelation of freedom and possibility, as if life itself had been paused while I endured the storm, and now it was beginning anew, rich with color, sound, and opportunity. I started exploring new paths, both personally and professionally, taking risks I had never dared to consider while trapped in the weight of Daniel's control, and each success, each small victory, was a reaffirmation of the strength I had discovered within myself. I enrolled in courses I had postponed for years, workshops that challenged me creatively and intellectually, and with every lesson, every assignment, I felt the walls of fear and self-doubt crumble further. I met people who inspired me, mentors who guided me, and friends who supported me with a fierce loyalty that reminded me that life was not meant to be endured alone. Slowly, I began dating again, cautiously at first, unsure if my heart was ready to trust, yet each encounter, each smile, each conversation reminded me that love was not something to fear, but something to embrace on my own terms. I laughed more, truly laughed, in ways that made my chest ache and my soul feel light, a sensation I had long forgotten under the shadow of betrayal. My family remained my foundation, their presence a constant reassurance that I was not alone, that I was capable, that I deserved joy. My mother's advice became gentle guidance, my father's wisdom became my strategy, my sister's humor became my relief, and together, they created a cocoon of love and safety that allowed me to flourish. One evening, as I sat on my balcony with a notebook in hand, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I realized how far I had come from that devastating Christmas Eve. The memory of Daniel handing me divorce papers felt distant now, like a chapter one had closed with resolve and strength, and in its place was a vision of a life entirely my own, a life I had earned through resilience, determination, and courage. I began to plan a future that thrilled me, setting goals that challenged me, dreams that excited me, and opportunities that filled me with anticipation rather than dread. I took on projects at work that required me to step outside my comfort zone, collaborated with colleagues in ways that expanded my horizons, and found satisfaction in accomplishments I had once thought unattainable. The energy that had once been spent on worry and fear was now redirected toward growth, toward creation, toward building a life that reflected who I truly was, not who someone else demanded I be. Nights were spent reflecting on my journey, writing down lessons learned, and visualizing the life I wanted to continue shaping, a life that would not be dictated by fear, betrayal, or the limitations imposed by others. I started traveling more, seeking experiences that challenged and inspired me, immersing myself in new cultures, cuisines, and perspectives, and with each adventure, I felt my confidence grow, my spirit expand, my heart heal. Friends became a chosen family, people who celebrated my victories, offered comfort during setbacks, and encouraged me to embrace my full potential. Slowly, Daniel's presence faded from my life entirely, his memory reduced to a lesson rather than a burden, a reminder of what I had survived and overcome rather than a source of pain. I discovered that the greatest joy came not from revenge, not from proving him wrong, but from thriving in the life I had reclaimed, from creating beauty, pursuing passion, and embracing freedom. I began mentoring others, sharing my story in ways that inspired, empowered, and uplifted, finding fulfillment in helping people navigate challenges with strength and grace. With each passing day, the weight of the past diminished, replaced by confidence, resilience, and a renewed sense of purpose. I realized that independence, self-respect, and joy were the most powerful gifts I could give myself, far more valuable than any material possession or validation from someone who had betrayed me. And in the quiet moments, when I reflected on the journey from betrayal to empowerment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not for what I had endured, but for the woman I had become because of it. The future was no longer something to fear, it was something to embrace, filled with infinite possibilities, each day an opportunity to grow, to love, to create, and to celebrate life fully on my own terms. I had survived the storm, faced the truth, reclaimed my power, and now I was free, truly free, to live, to love, and to thrive, unshaken, unstoppable, and unapologetically myself. Months had passed since that fateful Christmas Eve, yet the memory of Daniel's smug arrogance, the papers, and the betrayal lingered like a shadow I had finally learned to control rather than fear, and now, standing in front of him for what I knew would be the final confrontation, I felt calm, focused, and unshakably powerful. He looked different than I remembered, smaller somehow, stripped of the illusion of control he had carried like armor, his eyes flicking nervously, searching for a way to regain some foothold, some shred of dominance, but finding none. I held myself steady, my posture straight, my gaze unwavering, letting the silence build, letting him feel the full weight of accountability. "Daniel," I began, my voice low and precise, carrying authority and finality, "we need to talk. Not as a couple, not as partners, not as anything other than what this is, the conclusion of a chapter that you tried to manipulate, control, and destroy. I want this to be clear, everything you thought you could hide, everything you thought you could take from me, has been reclaimed. Every lie has been exposed, every deceit documented, every attempt to manipulate undone. You have no power here." He opened his mouth to interrupt, but I held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "No. Not a word. Listen. Learn. Accept." His jaw tightened, hands fidgeting with the edge of his sleeve, and I could see the realization in his eyes that he had truly lost, that the tables had irrevocably turned. I have spent months rebuilding my life, reclaiming my independence, strengthening my heart, my mind, and my spirit. "And I am not the person you can manipulate anymore," I continued, my voice steady, unwavering, and strong. "Every attempt to intimidate, guilt, or control me has failed. You will not haunt my future. You will not taint my joy. You will not touch the life I am creating." The room between us felt electric, tense, filled with the echoes of the past but charged with the promise of closure. Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly, the first visible sign of defeat since the night of the papers, and I knew he understood that this confrontation was not about anger or revenge, it was about finality, about drawing a line that could not be crossed. "Emily, please," he began, voice wavering, a shadow of the man who had once exuded control and arrogance, but I shook my head, cutting him off. "No, Daniel. This isn't about your pleas, your justifications, or your attempts to rewrite history. This is about me, my life, and my future. And the future is mine to define, not yours to disrupt." I took a deliberate step forward, closing the distance, letting my calm authority dominate the space. "You have been given every opportunity to take responsibility, to face your actions, to accept the consequences. Now it is done. Now it ends." His eyes flickered, a mix of fear, regret, and frustration, and for a moment, I almost felt pity, fleeting and quickly suppressed. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. I turned slightly, letting my gaze sweep the space, imagining my life stretching ahead, unshackled and full of possibility. From this moment forward, I said, my voice carrying the weight of conviction, you no longer have any claim over me emotionally, financially, or otherwise. The ties that bound us have been severed, and any attempt to interfere will be met with consequences that are absolute and uncompromising. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line, his usual arrogance gone, replaced by the stark reality of accountability. I felt a surge of empowerment, a quiet triumph that came not from vengeance, but from reclaiming my life fully and decisively. I hope you understand what this means, I added softly, almost pityingly, that this is not just the end of our marriage, but the end of your control over me. It is my life, my choices, my happiness, and you will not have a part in it. Without waiting for a response, I turned, walking toward the door, feeling the air shift around me, the weight of the past lifting with every step. Behind me, Daniel remained frozen, the reality of defeat sinking in, the room heavy with the quiet of closure and finality. Outside, the air was crisp, the city lights glowing softly against the night sky, and I felt a sense of peace, of triumph, of liberation that was intoxicating and real. The past could no longer hurt me, the betrayal could no longer control me, and the future was mine to shape, filled with infinite possibility, strength, and joy. As I stepped into the night, breathing deeply, feeling the cool wind against my face, I realized that the final confrontation had not been about confrontation at all. It had been about freedom, about reclaiming everything I had lost, about embracing the life I was meant to live. And in that moment, I felt unstoppable, unshakable, and finally, free. The months after the final confrontation felt like stepping into a new world, a life I had imagined only in fleeting dreams but was now real, tangible, and mine to shape, each day an opportunity to grow, explore, and fully embrace the woman I had become, free from manipulation, betrayal, or fear, and every morning I woke with a sense of purpose, anticipation, and quiet joy that I hadn't felt in years. I began pursuing passions I had long postponed, diving into creative projects with intensity and enthusiasm, discovering talents and interests that surprised me with their depth and beauty, from painting late into the night to writing short stories that poured my emotions onto the page in ways that healed as much as they inspired, and each completed project felt like a victory, a tangible reminder that I was capable, strong, and alive. Work became not just a source of income but a source of fulfillment, a place where I could prove to myself that my intellect, creativity, and determination could thrive without compromise, and I sought out challenges, collaborations, and opportunities that pushed me beyond my comfort zone, each success reinforcing the growing confidence I carried into every other area of life. Travel became a form of liberation, a way to reconnect with the world, with new cultures, people, and perspectives, and with each trip, I felt myself expanding, shedding remnants of the past, embracing experiences with an open heart and mind, knowing that I was writing my own story now, uninterrupted and untainted by anyone's control. Friends, old and new, became my chosen family, a network of support, joy, and laughter that reminded me that love and loyalty existed beyond romantic entanglements, and I cherished the moments spent with them. From quiet dinners to spontaneous adventures, each interaction a celebration of connection, trust, and mutual respect. I started mentoring younger colleagues and friends, sharing lessons I had learned about resilience, self-respect, and empowerment, and the act of helping others navigate challenges not only brought them clarity but reinforced my own strength, reminding me of how far I had come and how much power I truly held within myself. Slowly, carefully, I began exploring the possibility of love again, cautiously at first, recognizing the value of trust, honesty, and communication, and with each tentative step, I found hope, companionship, and the thrilling reminder that my heart could heal, grow, and open fully on my terms, unencumbered by past betrayals. Financially, I took control of my life, establishing stability, independence, and security, making decisions with confidence, setting boundaries that were respected, and finding empowerment in knowing that my future was mine alone to navigate, without reliance on anyone who had once sought to control me. Nights were often spent reflecting, journaling, and planning, visualizing the life I wanted, taking deliberate steps to ensure that each choice I made aligned with my values, my passions, and my vision, and I found deep satisfaction in the knowledge that I was no longer drifting, but actively steering my destiny. The past, Daniel, the betrayal? They existed only as lessons, distant memories that shaped my strength but no longer dictated my happiness, and whenever I felt a flicker of old fear or doubt, I reminded myself of the woman I had become, resilient, empowered, confident, and fully alive. I celebrated small victories, milestones of personal growth, achievements both big and small, and allowed myself to revel in the joy of progress, knowing that each step forward was proof of my capacity to thrive despite adversity. Creativity, freedom, love, connection, and purpose became the pillars of my existence, and I embraced them fully, unapologetically, and with gratitude for the journey that had led me to this point. Every challenge I faced was met with calm determination, every opportunity seized with clarity, every relationship nurtured with honesty, respect, and authenticity, and I found fulfillment in knowing that my life was now a reflection of my true self. No compromises, no fear, no shadows of manipulation or betrayal. And as I looked toward the horizon, toward a future brimming with possibility, I realized that the greatest victory of all was not the exposure of deceit, not the confrontation, not even the independence I had fought for, it was the life I was building. Day by day, moment by moment, a life filled with strength, joy, love, and the unshakable knowledge that I had survived, endured, and thrived, emerging not just intact, but stronger, wiser, and unstoppable, fully ready to embrace everything that the world had to offer. It was a crisp spring morning when I realized how far I had truly come, standing on my balcony with the sun warming my face, the city below alive with movement, and the air carrying a sense of possibility so palpable that it felt like the world itself was acknowledging my triumph. Every breath I took a reminder of freedom, resilience, and the life I had fought so hard to reclaim. The past, with all its pain, betrayal, and manipulation, felt like a distant shadow, heavy but no longer capable of touching me, and I could smile freely, fully, without fear, without hesitation, knowing that I had survived, endured, and emerged stronger than ever. Work, once a place of routine and obligation, had become a playground of creativity and achievement, each project a reflection of my skill, determination, and vision, and colleagues approached me with respect, admiration, and sometimes awe, unaware of the battles I had fought to reach this point, unaware of the strength hidden behind my calm demeanor. Travel had opened doors to experiences I had only dreamed of, moments of wonder and discovery that reminded me of the vastness of the world, of the richness of life, and of the endless possibilities that awaited someone who refused to be confined by fear or past betrayal. Love, tentative and cautious at first, had blossomed into something beautiful and unthreatening, a connection built on honesty, respect, and mutual admiration, and I marveled at the way my heart could open again without hesitation, embracing joy without reservation. Friends and family continued to be my anchor, their unwavering support a constant reminder that life was meant to be shared, celebrated, and experienced fully, and I cherished each conversation, laugh, and quiet moment spent with them, knowing that these connections were real, enduring, and unshakable. One afternoon, as I walked through the park, the sunlight filtering through the trees, I thought about Daniel, not with anger, not with fear, but with a calm detachment that came only from true closure, understanding that his role in my life was over, that the chapter had been closed, and that the pages I now wrote were entirely my own. I had learned that the greatest power was not in revenge, not in exposing deceit, not in proving anyone wrong, but in reclaiming oneself fully, in embracing freedom, joy, and possibility with courage and clarity, and in living a life defined solely by my choices and my values. I paused by a fountain, the water sparkling like 1,000 tiny diamonds, and allowed myself a moment to reflect, to absorb the journey, to honor the strength, resilience, and courage that had carried me through months of turmoil, betrayal, and confrontation. And then, almost imperceptibly, I felt a lightness, a joy, a sense of completeness that had been absent for far too long, a quiet triumph that came not from the downfall of another, but from the rise of myself. That evening, as I prepared for a small gathering of friends to celebrate both the new season and the new life I had built, I realized how far I had come from that devastating Christmas night when Daniel handed me divorce papers and tried to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. Every choice I had made since then, every step of reclaiming my independence, every act of courage and resilience, had led me to this moment, fully alive, fully empowered, and fully free. Laughter filled the room, conversations flowed, and I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with past pain, only with the richness of life, the joy of connection, and the beauty of moments fully owned and fully embraced. My heart, once heavy with betrayal and sorrow, now pulsed with possibility and hope, a rhythm that carried me forward, reminding me that life was meant to be lived boldly, passionately, and authentically. As the night wore on, I stood by the window, looking out at the twinkling city lights, and allowed myself to dream again, to plan, to imagine a future filled with adventure, love, and fulfillment, a future that was entirely mine to create. And in that moment, I knew, with unwavering certainty, that I had not just survived the storm, I had mastered it, turning pain into strength, betrayal into clarity, and loss into the most powerful gift of all, the life I had always deserved. The past no longer had the power to define me, the mistakes and deceit of others no longer held sway over my happiness, and the future stretched out before me, limitless, inviting, and shimmering with possibility. And I stepped into it fully, boldly, and without hesitation, knowing that this time, I was the author of every chapter, the master of every moment, and the curator of a life filled with joy, love, and the unshakable knowledge that I had survived, endured, and emerged unstoppable.